Oh no. I think it's all working. Welcome. Thank you for coming. Feel free to stuff in. We have a few seats right up here in the front row, reserved for dignitaries who didn't come. So I know, I'm just kidding. No, they're coming late, but it's too late. They're losing their seats. So anyone need a seat, come right up here and take it. And hi, Murph. Good to see you. Hey, Wendy. We're delighted to have you here. I'm delighted to have you here with my good friend, Charlie Wheelan, and our visitor, Dan Goor, of Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Parks and Rec, lots of things, and who's been a comedy writer for a number of years now. Dan and I met. Dan was my first student. My name's Russ Muirhead. I teach in the government department, for those of you who don't know me. And Dan and I met years and years and years ago. He was my first student. I was in graduate school, and I needed somebody to experiment on.
Yeah.
So Dan volunteered, and I tried to teach him.
Right.
And I think it worked.
It was mostly,
it worked.
Yeah, it was a lot of experimentation.
Yeah, you grew in wisdom.
I did.
Under my tutelage.
How many people here take classes with Russ?
It's only a few who, yeah.
That's kind of a real statement.
How many are part of the class action lawsuit?
And so since then, I think, gosh, I mean, Dan majored in biochemistry and aimed at different things, but ended up doing this, whatever this is. And so I guess, Dan, my first question is,
what is this?
What is this, and how did you end up doing it?
First of all, thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here. This is the nicest lobby that I've ever spoken in.
If he comes back, we're going to give him a real classroom.
I sat in on one of Russ's classes, and he said both that it was in a lobby and that anybody could get up at any point and leave. He encouraged people to leave, which I thought was a strange way of introducing me. So I'm a comedy writer. I write. I started in late night. My story is that I was a biochemistry major, and I was about to go to medical school. I was enrolled in medical school, and I got a grant to travel for a year. So I got $18,000 from the school to travel for 1 year, and I took clown classes in London. Did anyone see Baskets? Has anyone seen that? First of all, Baskets is great. It's with Zach Galifianakis, but it's about this kind of total asshole of. Are we allowed to curse?
You just did.
Okay.
No.
This real jerk of a French clown teacher. So French clown is like a very specific type of clown class, and I was very bad at it, and he was very mean. So he'd say things like, "Who here thinks he is good, and who here thinks he talks like a vacuum cleaner?" And he was quite rude. So I gave up on that, and then I worked for a barrister. But the point was, by the time I got back on a murder trial, which was very cool, by the time I got back, I realized I did not want to go to med school, mostly because I think blood is disgusting and should be always inside of the body. And every fluid, I feel that way about almost every fluid.
Every fluid, yeah.
Yes, basically every fluid.
Snot.
Don't want to see it. I interviewed at, the first place I interviewed for med school, they said, what do you think the hardest part about being a doctor will be? And I said, being around sick people. And they were like, what? And I was like, because I'm very empathetic. I really, and then they also said, why do you want to be a doctor? And I had thought, I'm good with people, I don't need to practice interviewing. And they said, why do you want to be a doctor? And I went, oh, that is a good question. So I decided not to be a doctor, and my friend, Charlie Grandy, whose son, Teddy Grandy, is a freshman here, our first year here at Dartmouth. Teddy Grandy, anybody know him? All right, good kid. His dad wants to know. No.
So far, so good.
So far, so good. I mean, he's only a freshman now, not that many people know him. He was applying for jobs, and I said to him, I have 4 weeks before med school starts. Can I apply with you for a writing job as a writing team? And he said, sure. And we started writing the worst packet of all time for Saturday Night Live. Like truly bad. This was in the late 90s, and we had a song parody of a song from like 1974 Free to Be You and Me.
Oh, I remember that
Yeah,
song.
not a relevant song. It was bad.
That was a great song.
And then we found out about The Daily Show, and we applied for The Daily Show, and 2 weeks later we got hired as writers on The Daily Show. And
Were you shocked?
I was a little shocked. It was very fast moving. But I think also I was 23 years old, and I don't think I realized how crazy it was that had happened. There were so many things, so much of getting a job in a non-traditional way, I think, is both having the talent, the packet we wrote was good, or good enough at least, and also having the luck that there is that opening. They hadn't had an opening at The Daily Show for 3 years. And that somebody is willing to put your piece of paper in front of the right eyes. And so we got hired. I said, they brought us back after we watched an episode of the show, and then they brought us back and they said, you're hired. And I was like, for real? Can I tell med school I'm not going? And the woman was like, no, you should be a doctor. Yeah. But anybody can be a doctor.
And so you ended up...
I don't know if that's actually true. But by the way, please be doctors. It's good to be a doctor. And then I was there for 3 years. Then I was at a show. I worked for Last Call with Carson Daly. Has anyone ever seen that show? That was a show that made me decide to apply to law school. I applied to law school. Deferred law school, and I made a deal with my wife. Where
By the way, who's writing recommendation letters the whole time?
Russ writing recommendation letters.
Got a shelf full of recommendation letters
from
Dan.
Russ.
Yeah.
Not that great. I've read them. A lot of one of my best students.
Among.
I did have my biochemistry teacher write a recommendation when I applied to law school, and she wrote, I'm not really sure what Dan is doing. He did apply to medical school before this. Anyway, deferred for a year, and I said, I'm either going to get a job that I'm proud of, or I'm going to write a script I'm proud of, whether it gets produced or not, or I'm going to go to law school. And by the way, I was excited for law school. It wasn't like, I don't want to go to law school. And then 2 weeks later, I got hired by Conan on the Late Night with Conan O'Brien show, which was his late night show before his Tonight Show, before his thing, before the podcast. Oh, can you guys not hear me?
I think
most of the time?
I think we're coming through.
Okay.
Can you hear Dan? Yeah.
And then I worked there for 5 years, and then a friend of mine from college is this guy, Mike Schur. And Mike Schur and I did a lot of theater and comedy stuff in college together, and he called me up and he was like, hey, he was at The Office. It was like a big deal at The Office. And he played Mose. Has anyone seen The Office? It's an American sitcom. I'm just kidding. I know, it's America's most favorite. It's whatever.
We love The Office.
I know.
You do know that the real Andy Bernard works down at Tuck.
Oh, really?
Yes. So, because he went, I guess, to Harvard with somebody who's the writer. So.
No, Dartmouth probably, and with
So
Mindy.
when they were trolling around for names, yeah, so I work across from Andy Bernard, but not the guy who went to Cornell and sings a cappella. The
Right.
real one.
Well, because Mindy went to Dartmouth. She was just here. Okay, so I'm sorry this has become such a long story. But so he said, we're going to create a new show. We don't have a title for it, and we don't know what it's going to be about, but it's a spin-off of The Office in some capacity. So Charlie Grandy and I had split up as writing partners, which was almost like a divorce, but we're still good friends. I don't know why I'm going into that detail. But if you see Teddy, tell him what the fuck. So we both interviewed for a slot at The Office and one at Untitled Daniels Shore show. This was before Amy, this is before Parks and Rec, and they said, we want to hire both of you. Which job do you want to work on? And I think this is also a life lesson. So Charlie's had a very good career, so this sounds like maybe I shouldn't say it's a life lesson. Charlie said, I want to work on The Office. So Charlie got hired onto season 5 of The Office, and I said, I want to work on this new show because I want to get in at the ground floor. And it's a bigger risk, but I was also pretty young, and I had a 1-year-old, but I didn't care what happened to her. She was 1, you know? What kind of personality does a 1-year-old have, honestly?
How bad can it get?
How bad can it get? Pretty bad. No, she turned out great. And then they were considering doing a show about a family, a mockumentary about a family. This is before Modern Family. Then they decided not to do that. They had a bunch of different ideas, and then Mike really wanted to do something about local government. And then they hired a couple of writers. Then they hired Amy. I quit my job at Conan. They hired Amy. Amy was pregnant. We went from 13 guaranteed episodes to 8, and you're paid by the episode. My wife was a lawyer at a hedge fund. She'd quit her job. It was scary. So I worked at the office for a little bit. And then
I see. That's how
I was there.
Filled at the office.
Yes. So I was at Parks and Rec for the first 5 years, and I was kind of the number 2 guy there. And then Mike and I decided to create a new show, and we created Brooklyn Nine-Nine. And a lot of why we created Brooklyn Nine-Nine was kind of in response to what was difficult about Parks and Rec. So people don't, I think probably most of you are too young to have watched Parks and Rec when it first came out, because it first came out in like 2009. So probably between 2 and 6 years old. But Parks and Rec is what was called a bubble show, which means it was constantly in danger of being canceled. And now it's like a beloved show that people watch on streaming. And the thing about Parks and Rec was everyone was like, the first season, they didn't figure it out. You know, you got to skip the first season. And now people are just like, it's just another season. They did 7 seasons, blah, blah, blah. But it was a difficult show. And part of the reason it was difficult was it's about local government. It's like not that sexy a topic. And it's a lot of, we had talking heads, which helped, but you know, you do an episode, you have to.
When you say talking heads, what do you mean?
Sorry, like the mockumentary, people talking directly to camera. And you can get out a lot of exposition, and you can say, today we're doing an environmental impact report.
Like Leslie turns to the camera and
yes.
just talks to us, the viewers.
Yeah, because it's a documentary crew.
I see, yeah.
But part of the reason we did Brooklyn was everyone knows what a police department is. We don't have to explain, today we're having a public hearing. And in a public hearing, these kooks are gonna say these kooky things, and we just have to do blah, blah, blah. We could just go, Terry could walk out with, the camera could come off 99th Precinct, drop down to Terry talking to Jake, and say, there's been a murder. And you're like, oh, okay, they're gonna solve a murder. We all know what that is. And we could also sort of borrow the visual vocabulary of cop shows, cop dramas. And the world has been trained on procedural cop dramas. So they know exactly what they're looking at. So anyway, so then we did Brooklyn. We did it for 8 seasons and 153 episodes. And then I did a show called Killing It. Anyone seen Killing It? It's on Peacock, so probably not. You guys got to get the cock.
We're gonna watch it tonight.
It stars Craig Robinson, AKA the Pontiac Bandit from Brooklyn. I think if you like it, I think you'll enjoy it. If you like Brooklyn, I think you'll enjoy it. And then also a sitcom called Grand Crew, which was on NBC. And then now, I am developing a few shows, which means I'm not working. No, it means like I have a pilot that's going to be shot in, likely to be shot in March or so.
So can you go back, because it was kind of a giant leap from med school to comedy writing.
Yeah.
Tell us about what you did in college
Oh.
that led you to believe you had some aptitude, interest in writing comedy.
So all through my childhood, I wanted to be a famous actor and a Nobel Prize-winning nuclear physicist. And then I took a very hard math class, and I started a math class in college, and I was like, oh, I cannot do physics. But I grew up in Bethesda, Maryland. Any Bethesdites? Woo! Right next to NIH. My dad worked at NIH. Like, I grew up around biochemistry. So the biochemistry part, which is not the part you're asking about, because that's obvious, I did a lot of biochemistry. I did a ton of, all through my childhood, all through high school, junior high school, I went to Interlochen. Anyone go to Interlochen? So I went to Interlochen, I did theater there, and I did theater in college. Russ probably saw me do theater.
Yeah.
And I did improv. I did a ton of improv, and I did clown class. And so it was really a thing that I loved doing. Like when I was in college, my goal was to be the funniest person at the college, which is probably not.
I'm trying to remember whether you were funny.
What an asshole.
Just kidding. So you wanted to be, you were a funny man. You wanted to be funny.
I wanted to be.
A good day was a day when you made people laugh.
Yeah.
And when you killed it.
Yeah.
A good day was a day when you killed it.
Sometimes at the expense of probably doing better.
Yeah, other stuff you should have been doing. It was a priority.
I had a section, there was a core class, there was a class that was called Jewish Life in the Shtetl, 17th and 18th century, which was affectionately known as Hebes for Dweebs. That was affectionate. I myself am Jewish. I'm just saying that was an affectionate name at the time. It was a different time. And when we had to take the class, everyone had to say why they were taking the class. But it was all like Jewish single kids, and it was so clear why they were taking it. So when it came to my turn, I said, I just want to meet a Jewish girl of my age. And the teacher was like, what? And then I was joking. I actually had a girlfriend at the time, which was rare. But so that's like an example of, I guess, trying to be funny in class. I feel like I was trying to be funny in class.
Yeah. So anyone here, any students here do improv? Anyone here? So we have a few.
And sketch, comedy, also sketch. Is there a war between improv and sketch? Yeah. And are you guys doing long form or short form? Both, okay. And how many people here go to the improv shows? All right, that's pretty good. Guys, you guys support them. Go to the shows. Yeah. Do people do stand-up also, or is that not a thing? The one person who was shaking her head allegedly does stand-up, which is interesting. Yeah, so I did a lot of both of those things. And then, yeah. But I didn't know that, I mean, I know this sounds so stupid. We live in an era when people know who showrunners are. They know what the term showrunner means. They know that there are TV writers. And even though the writers were listed on the back of by back, I mean the end of a TV show, I just didn't think about that. I thought you're an actor or you're watching TV. You know, and so it was, a few of my friends had gotten jobs at Saturday Night Live, and so when they got jobs, I was like, oh, this is a career.
Yeah, and when by the way, did you look at me and say, oh my gosh, this is my career? It's not something I'm just doing for a few years until, you know, I figure out what I'm really doing.
Probably a few years into Parks and Rec.
Wow.
Which is after, maybe a few years into Conan. So Conan and the Daily Show is a news parody show. I don't know if you guys, I'm not like trying to be a pedantic but it's a news parody show. And so you're writing, like I'd say over the 3 years that I was there, 5,000 jokes. And those are just jokes. Those are like one-liner jokes. You're just a joke machine. And then Conan is sketch comedy. And it was like Pee-wee's Playhouse. If you should go on YouTube and you should watch old Late Night with Conan O'Brien. It's before The Tonight Show. It was really, really goofy and really cartoony and really funny. And I think of all of the shows, it was so non-topical, you can enjoy it still. You know, I mean, they have, has anyone seen Late Night with Conan O'Brien? Any of the old, in the back there? Noise. There's stuff like, yeah, none of it will make sense now. But I was good at those jobs, but I felt like there were always people who were, like a tier of people who were better than I at those things. And then it wasn't until I was at Parks that I was like, oh, this is what I'm good at this. This is what I should be doing.
So you go from like writing jokes, literally like one line, yes. 5,000
it's
jokes.
It's like one-dimensional, two-dimensional, three-dimensional.
Sketches to actual script stories, the whole thing. A script, what was your first script where you did the whole thing, the whole episode, as it were?
So I wrote a spec script for The Office that's what got me hired. And that script was, the idea was Pam, it's Secretary's Day and Pam doesn't want to be a secretary, so she's like upset that everyone's congratulating her on being a secretary. And she goes to the bathroom to get away from them and she opens up the door and the night janitor has died. And he's there. And it becomes, and everybody knew the night janitor, but Michael Scott didn't know the night janitor's name. And so when he realizes that everyone else had a relationship with Randy or whatever, he overdoes it. It was before I'll point out the episode with the dead bird, which may have had some similarities later. The first episode I wrote for Parks and Rec was The Reporter, which was in season 1 when Shauna Malwae-Tweep interviews Leslie Knope. And then, but that, on a show like that, you write a draft. Your draft comes in at, let's say, 35 pages, okay? Then the showrunner puts in notes, and a room sits down, and you write what we call alts. So if there's a joke, if it's like, hey, Russ, what's going on? You might do Alt. Hello, Russ, how are you doing? Alt. Russ, what's up? Alt. I mean, except these would all be jokes, you know? And so you'd have this 37-page script would go up to 60 pages. Then the showrunner comes in. So if I'm the number 2, I'm sitting at the keyboard. I'm writing down their stuff. I'm writing down my stuff, the other writers. I'm rewriting scenes.
Can I just ask, like, when you're doing this, you're writing a lot of jokes in the script itself. Are you all laughing?
Sometimes.
Is it fun, or is it just hard work? And you're like, oh yeah, people will laugh at that, but we're working too hard to laugh.
Sometimes it's 1 o'clock in the morning and you have to have a joke and no one is laughing. And then sometimes, again, a Parks and Rec thing, do people remember Ben and the calzone? So that was like a room joke. So Ben Wyatt loves calzones. And the first time that was introduced, the writer had it in the script like 2 times. And we thought we started just writing it in a bunch. And then she got really annoyed that we were adding so much. She's like, it's a Nakamura. Now a Nakamura there are all these terms of art for comedy writing. Like a blow is the joke at the end of a scene. So you have to have a good blow. You always want to end a scene on a big joke. And a Nakamura is there was some sitcom somewhere where they had a funny character whose name was Nakamura, and they said Nakamura like 37 times, and no one laughed at the table read when it was said the first time. And then they were like, oh no, there are 36 Nakamuras to go. So she was like, this is a Nakamura, you can't do this. But we had so much fun seeing her get more and more upset about the fact that we'd added all these calzones. And then it killed, and so that became a part of the whole thing. But there were other times where that didn't work. We had a joke where Leslie Knope, it's like a bottom of the, it's like crunch time, and they need to figure something out. And she goes, this reminds me of when I was on the girls' basketball team, and there was 7 seconds left. We were down by 2 points, and the coach turned to me. I was on the bench, and he turned to me and he said, Leslie, pack up the balls, we're losing this game. And it cracked us up so much, and Mike came back in, he's like, I don't get it. And it just did not go in the show. But it was like 1 o'clock in the morning and we were giddy, just giddy laughing about it.
So, but your whole identity is about being funny. What's it like when you write something and the room is silent, or you, as a group, write something?
I wouldn't know.
So maybe you had a friend who went through that experience.
No, I mean,
Well, the 5,000 jokes you wrote for
you write 5,000 jokes, you
Jon
get really
Stewart,
used to.
how many of those got used?
Probably 10% or fewer. So you get used to rejection. Rejection is a big part of my life.
Seriously though, it is.
No,
Like,
it
there's
is.
a lot
The
of
best writers are
rejection.
people, and I think this is probably true in every field. The best scientists are scientists who do experiments, and the experiment fails, and they're like, oh, okay, what did I learn? I learned that this pathway in this experiment didn't work. In fact, I would get in fights with my kids' science teachers because when you're a kid and you do a lab, you're not doing a lab, you're doing a demonstration, and there's a right answer. And in science, there's no right answer, right? You do an experiment, and the experiment has an answer, and that's the answer, right or wrong. Even if you're doing a thing that has been done 150 times, and they always get that the pH is 7.6, and you got it was 2, you know, you didn't do it wrong. You probably did something wrong there, but anyway, so.
I think it was good you were not a doctor.
Yeah. I mean, you have no idea how good it is. I literally find it disgusting. I mean,
There was nothing wrong with the operation.
yeah.
This is just one outcome.
Yeah.
And I'm very sorry.
Why is the doctor vomiting? Yeah, you are very. Has anyone had a doctor with terrible bedside manner?
Oh,
It's horrifying, isn't it? I had a doctor once, and I had a thing on my foot, and he went, "Oh no, oh that's bad." And then it was fine. And then I said to him, "You know, you really scared me. You said, 'Oh no, that's bad,'" and he went, "Yeah, I don't have a great bedside manner." It just feels like something you could work on.
that is actually funny.
Yeah.
So, but even now, even at this, with a lot of wonderful successes behind you, you know, you still. Sounds like you still might write a script or write a pilot or a pitch, or even just a simple thing as a joke and have it not work.
Yes.
and put it out there and have everyone say, no thanks, Dan, not interested, or whatever. I mean, sounds like it's still a hard thing
Yes,
to do.
it is. I mean, I had a show that I had set up at HBO that was about a family that goes on a trip.
Oh, it's a good one. I love that. I
And
love the story.
the kids it's a daughter who's about to go off to college, and it's a family, daughter, son. The daughter's about to go off to college. The mom buys the daughter a book that has it's called a dead drop. It has a microchip in it, and the FSB, KGB, and the CIA come after the family. But it's grounded, it's hard, funny, and it's like real people. What would happen to you if you got caught up in that, in a Bourne situation? And then it was a way of getting at like familial relationships. So it would be like the mother and the father get taken and they're put in separate rooms, and the assassin is like, tell us where the microchip is, or I'll kill someone in your family, tell me who to kill. And the dad is like, well, not the kids, so I guess my wife? And then they meet back up and she's like, what did you say? And he said, I said not the kids, I said you. And she's like, I said me. And he's like, I didn't know you could say me. You know, so you get at the kind of like these dynamics in a different way. Anyway, long story short, after a year, they passed on it.
Yeah, it's
So it happens. I mean, it's really, and it's a tough time in the industry right now, so
Yeah.
that makes it harder.
yeah. It's just hard to be funny in the first place, or is it easy to be funny?
To be funny, or to be funny like to sell stuff?
Well, yeah. So selling stuff is hard.
Selling stuff is hard right now.
So how about this? Is being funny hard right now? In part because we're in a moment when everyone's taking offense at things. We're in a moment when tribal passions are high, when each side is really looking at the other side and saying, they're destroying the things we care about most in our country. Is this? And you're writing, you're writing professionally for a broad audience, not just for one side of things. Like, is it a time when we can still laugh?
I think often in times like this, we need to laugh more, and often we do. Look at all the Norman Lear shows that he wrote. All in the Family, is a time when there's generational conflict, there's true conservatism and true liberalism, and like the country is, and it was a funny show that was enjoyed by both sides. I think the structural problems with comedy right now are less to do with that and more to do with streaming, the streaming ecosystem, and with phones, the fact that people are just constantly on their phones, and with the algorithmization of life. So I think that, so for streaming, the thing, which none of you would necessarily know, but if you want to sell a show to a streaming service, it has to have a propulsive plot engine. So that means it has to be like Only Murders, which is a show that pulls it off. They're solving murders. But all of the comedies...
I'm not sure what propulsive plot engine.
It means that every episode is pushing you to the next episode based on the plot.
Okay.
So you're solving a murder, or trying to think of what another...
You're hunting a spy, or...
You're hunting a spy. You're doing... all the shows you liked, with maybe a few exceptions, are just hangout shows. They're shows where they're not... The thing that is pushing you to watch the next episode is you thought the episode before was really funny. And you really liked the characters, and you just want to spend more time with them.
Yeah.
As soon as you add in this propulsive thing, it pushes down the time you spend with the characters. And then also, we did 153 episodes of Brooklyn. That's like 20 a season, 22, 23 a season. Now it's 10. You don't ever get to know the characters. I'm not saying there aren't shows that are big hits, et cetera, but the biggest hit comedies are not comedies at all. I mean, The Bear is not a comedy at all. It's like the saddest, most stressful show on television. So that is one thing that's making it tough. And then I think the algorithm makes it hard to have a communal response to stuff. So even shows like Seinfeld, which a bazillion people watched, if it were on now, it would still just be a tiny segment. There's no show that would transcend. Friends.
Really? So you think it's even a show like that would just be a niche?
I'm not saying it might be the most popular show on TV now. Friends might be the most popular show on TV right now. But unless it were on Netflix, and then if it were on Netflix, it would only do 10 episodes and probably only 3 seasons, because that's their model. They only do 10 episodes for a show. They're not doing more than that. It's hard to know. That's why I never like those comparisons across
We
time.
never get to know Ron Swanson,
Yeah, you never get to know Ron Swanson.
my favorite person.
Again, hurtful. Literally looking at me. Not a real person, also, should be noted. That speaks to a pathology in Russ.
So what about the challenge of getting canceled? Or do you think comedy should be transgressive?
Well, so Brooklyn did get canceled.
I mean, not like canceled the network, it's like
Oh,
comedians
canceled.
standing up and saying things, and because of social media, in other words, and like that's it. Which, and since comedians are always on a knife's edge, does that have a dampening effect?
I'm sure it does. I mean, I feel like I wrote mostly for network comedy, and so like on a network, it's hard. At any point in time, you're not going to be writing stuff that's transgressive, you know, in that way. I mean, I know there are all these comics who come to colleges and say they're not allowed to say anything anymore, but I'm not usually speaking in the lobby of college buildings, you know, so I don't have that experience myself.
Yet.
I feel like, I'm not trying to avoid the question, I can't really speak to it. I feel like there's stuff on TV that is transgressive, and there's stuff, you know, and there's stuff that's not transgressive that people take offense to anyway. And you kind of can't game it. And, you know, it's really interesting when you watch those Late Night with Conan O'Brien episodes, there'll be stuff where you're like, holy cow, I can't believe this is so inappropriate or wrong. And that is just, Conan was not transgressive in any way, but the sort of what the accepted language was that we could use, the accepted targets of jokes have evolved, and they continue to evolve over time, obviously. I mean, I would say that in 2020, in the height of the pandemic and post George Floyd, it was a very difficult time to write a show about cops. I will say that.
Yeah.
But you know, we tried to adapt, you know, to that and to deal with it. But in general, I haven't felt that fear.
Yeah.
But it is something people talk about. I don't know.
Do people come to you and say, you know, you've got to do a show on something? Are people always
Yeah.
pitching idea like,
Yeah.
you got to do we need a sitcom on this
Someone
or
I know keeps saying a show on professors.
that. I think it would be so funny.
A sexy silver-haired professor, you said.
Gets canceled.
Yeah. Gets canceled for being too sexy, you said. I said, what's the comedy? You said it doesn't have to be comedy. I just want to see it, you said. And then you said, can you just give me a video camera? I'll make it on my own. No, yeah, people do say that kind of thing. But yeah. And that doesn't mean, sometimes it has to be an idea that you...
And did you ever get, does everyone...
Did anything ever make it?
Where you think, you're right, that should be done, that'd be great. Or
No.
just like...
Yes, it's hard. I mean, I think different people are different.
Yeah.
It really has to be a thing that you also feel. It has to be something you fall in love with. You spend so much time with a project. Mm-hmm. So it's hard, and ownership is a difficult thing. I think if you don't feel ownership over it, it can be very difficult to work on.
So you, the writer, the producer, it really is a very personal expression.
Yes.
It's like, this is the novel you're going to write. You're going to spend the next number of years of your life working on this story.
I mean,
you've got to like the story.
For the 8 years of Brooklyn, I spent more time with those characters than I did with my family. You know, I was there all the time, and they were the best years of my life. It has been so downhill. No, but people do, it's funny, and also when people would, has anyone seen a late night show at all? Okay, so when people would apply to Conan, it's funny in the like, you should do this, so many people would pitch, and I think I did too, things we found in the couch cushions. And the idea was like, the host would be like, we have a lot of celebrities, you know, and they have pockets, stuff falls out of the pockets. It's kind of funny what you find in the couch cushions after they leave. And then you would say, you know, Cher was here, and we found her AARP card. I don't know, whatever, you know, like, everyone pitches that. Not the share thing, that was my magic. But, you know, whatever so there are things, but probably the fact that a lot of people feel the same way. Everyone feels like their own life is a comedy, right? I mean, when we wrote Parks and Rec.
Everyone feels their own life is a comedy. Their own
Yes,
life is something really enjoyable and dramatic about their
yes,
their
and that
world.
they're seeing that and which is great. They see the comedy of their own life, and they're like, you should do blah, blah, blah. When we wrote at The Daily Show, every serious news reporter would come up to us and say, oh, I got a story for you, or you got to do this, or like, my job is crazy and blah, blah, blah. You know, you work at, people from City Hall would come up to us at Parks and Rec, and they would talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Howard, so should we take some questions?
Yeah, so if students here,
All right.
if you have
I think
questions,
the
and let me
microphone-
invite students in particular. We have one right up front here, Deborah, and another one here. Vic, if you have a mic up here in the front.
Hello, my name is Seth, and 2 questions will be super quick, but what do you think of Day of Jackal, and why isn't the model at Peacock working? Because I thought that was a phenomenal series.
Great. I enjoyed Day of the Jackal a lot. I had a couple of plot problems with it towards the end. How did they not check the door on the catwalk? That is literally a door. And the last shot seemed insane to me. But I really enjoyed it. I think it doesn't work because I don't really know, but what would you say the identity of Peacock is?
It feels like NBC pushes a lot of sports, right?
Yes.
And so with the infusion of sports and also these sort of like laid back shows that are like chill, hang out, it's hard because like it's hard to compete with Paramount. It's hard to compete with Netflix.
Yeah.
And also Tubi has been like poaching some of these all-time greats, and so it's like, why go to Peacock?
I think originally what they wanted to do was put all the NBC shows on there and make it a home for comedy, and they kind of bungled that. They don't promote anything. So, I mean, Peacock is my home. NBC Peacock. Like, I have a deal with Universal. So the place I'm supposed to sell shows to is NBC Universal. But like, you watch Peacock and you haven't seen Killing It, and you would probably really like Killing It. So you should watch it, A, and B, that's a failing on their part that you don't even know what it is.
Hey, big fan. Could you talk a little bit about the casting process? Like, you talked about how our favorite characters, or we spend so much time with the Ron Swansons, the April Ludgates. Like, were you a part of those casting decisions? How did you find these like amazing actors that brought it all to life?
So both Brooklyn and Parks were cast by this woman, Allison Jones, and she also cast King of the Hill, The Office, and Veep, and there's a New Yorker article about her. If you look up Allison Jones, New Yorker, she's unbelievable. So she was a big part of it. On Parks and Rec, we met with a bunch of people like Aubrey. She was just like, Aubrey's a weirdo, and she'll be great on television. And we just met with her and we wrote a part for her. On Brooklyn,
Wow.
we met with Terry really early on. That's why his name is Terry in the show, which also made negotiations very difficult. We literally named the character after him. Chelsea Peretti was a writer on Parks and Rec, so we knew her, and she was one of the funniest, weirdest people we'd ever been around. So we created a part for her, and that part was Rosa's part. And then they were like, oh, I don't believe Chelsea Peretti is a cop at all. So we were like, okay, and we hired Stephanie Beatrice to play Rosa, and we just created the part of Gina Linetti for Chelsea Peretti. Again, you can see how, and then Andre, we wanted somebody with a lot of gravitas. They suggested him. He was what's called offer only. So you don't audition him, you don't read with him. The first time we had a great meeting with him on Skype, it was pre-Zoom, and he was like the most charming and lovely man. He'd done a show called Men of a Certain Age, which was a light comedy, but not a real comedy. And we had no idea if he'd be funny. And then at the table read, the very first time he opened his mouth, he was the funniest person on the set, including Andy. I mean, he's just the part was kind of perfect for him, and he understood it so perfectly. And I think his first line was, no, or something, and it just cracked everyone up. And then he has the ironic thing is, Andre had a bazillion watt smile. He had the best smile of anyone, and he smiled. And in the pilot, we wanted it to be a big moment when he smiled for the first time, so we spent a lot of the pilot cutting it out. Andy had just come off of SNL, and he really didn't want to do TV, but he was friends with Amy, and Amy Poehler said, Mike and Dan are doing a show, and we had talked about him, and you should at least meet with them. So this was literally the most Hollywood thing that I've ever done. The Lonely Island had rented a mansion to do one of their albums. So they live in New York. This is like a common thing, like bands will rent them, they use the money of the record label. And so we went to this mansion in the Hollywood Hills. We went up and they were like, hey, we just cut a track, do you guys want to listen? So we sit in their recording area and they play, I think it was Diaper Money. They played like one of their songs and we were like, ha ha ha, that's awesome. And then he was like, why don't we go to the pool and we'll talk about it? So we sat around the pool with Andy Samberg and we pitched the show to him and we pitched the character to him and we went on and on about the character and he was like, oh, Comedy McNulty? If anyone's seen The Wire, McNulty is the lead in The Wire. And we're like, Comedy McNulty. And then he went back and forth about whether he wanted to do TV and then he agreed to do it. Chris Pratt was just supposed to be a day player. And then he was so funny. He was supposed to be in what we call fractional. He was 6 of 13, and then he was so funny, we kept bringing him back. Do you need to order your tuk-tuk?
No, we know what they're doing. They've called me 15 times.
Russ has some Thai food he's trying to order.
What are they?
They're literally calling me.
Why are they calling you?
This will be in the show about Russ, Professor. Yeah. It's going to be in the middle of class, excuse me.
The sexy professor keeps getting calls.
They want to know when we need the food by.
Just answer and say now.
You can leave if you have to.
Yeah. Do you want to come back after dinner?
We have other questions. Russ can manage himself over there.
Hi, you briefly mentioned that Brooklyn Nine-Nine got canceled, and I remember it then switched networks. Yeah. How did you respond after the show that you had built got canceled and then rebound into a new season with a new network?
It sort of turned out to be the best thing that ever could have happened. And I would never have thought that, but it was, so we had been on Fox and we were owned by NBC. So we were never really a great fit for Fox, and then they decided they weren't going to do any shows like our show. So no single camera comedies. I don't know why I keep doing quotes. No single camera comedies. Those are shows that look like they're not multicams. They're not like Seinfeld or Friends. They're more like The Office, And they canceled us, and then there was this crazy. It was a show, by the way, that did fine in the ratings, but it turned out had a much younger audience. And so we were killing it on Hulu, but Hulu doesn't publish their results, and they also don't tell the creators of the show, because they don't want you to know your show's popular, because they don't want to ever pay you anything. And they don't want you to be like, hey, we have a popular show, we should hold out for more money. So we were very popular on Hulu, and there was this huge outpouring. It was, and it was Lin-Manuel Miranda, all these celebrities, which was very meaningful. But the most meaningful thing was really that the audience showed up and they were like, save the show. And then the dirty little secret is the show was making money already for NBC. So shows, this is so maybe boring, but maybe interesting. The economics of these kinds of shows is that they are created they are run at a deficit until they make about 100 episodes. And then they start becoming profitable when they get sold into reruns and sold into syndication and sold to streaming services. And the sort of puzzle pieces of things that make up profit has changed over time. And Brooklyn did okay because we're in like 200 different overseas territories. I don't know. I took a really nice question about and turned it into an economics lecture. Anyway, the point is, it was amazing. The fans came out. It was like the most gratifying thing. And then we got saved and we went to NBC. So it was like we got to hear that people like the show.
Yeah,
which
it was
like
kinda cool when
it
it
was
got saved.
really cool.
Yeah, it was. A lot of us were happy.
Yeah, it was
feedback.
really, really meaningful. And the other thing was, when you're a new show, you go to this thing called the upfronts, which is where you meet the advertisers. Are they calling again?
Yes.
Just go to your office.
I'm gonna try and
Are they watching the live stream, maybe?
They have a question.
They have a question. Yeah.
They're calling back.
They think I should do a show about a Thai takeout place. It was great. I forget what I was gonna say, but it was great.
More questions up here.
So I was wondering, when you're pitching a show, so something like Parks and Rec, which is in the same vein, and you're working with similar crew to The Office versus pitching a different show where it's kind of building it completely from the ground up, what are differences and similarities that you see between those two processes?
So, I mean, Parks and Rec was its own special thing because they basically, The Office was doing so well, they went to Greg Daniels and they said, give us another show. And we'll put it on the air for 13 episodes, no matter what. So that doesn't happen. That just does not happen anymore at all. So that process was, they could kind of do whatever they wanted, and it was great. For most shows, it is not really like that. I have worked on some shows that use IP, intellectual property. Like I'm working with a stand-up right now, and we're doing a show about her life, and it's so much easier because all the characters exist. You don't have to make up the characters, you don't have to make up the locations, you don't have to make up the conflicts. It's great. Did that answer your question? I feel like it didn't, but.
Bunch more questions up here. All sorts of questions. Why don't we just pass out a bunch of mics? Yeah. Go ahead.
So I'm like a huge fan of sitcoms, like a huge fan of yours, and like I think as like many sitcoms go for like many years, like what distinguishes like decent sitcoms from like the perfect ones is like heart, I guess, because like they're all funny, obviously, and so like as like the shows go on and you like fall in love with these characters and then they end up oftentimes falling in love with each other, like. What do you think like gives shows that magic, and how do you like create that?
That is, I think one thing is, like I mean, I'm gonna just assume you mean Brooklyn was one of the perfect shows, but I stayed at Brooklyn the entire time. I didn't hand it off, and I loved the characters. I wrote from a perspective of loving the characters, and I think that there's a thing that happens in writers' rooms, and I think this happens probably if you're just writing stories. If you don't like the characters, the audience isn't going to like the characters. And there's a real temptation, especially with writers in a room, to write jokes which will undercut a character. So a lot of my job was protecting the world and protecting the characters and saying, that's really funny, but if Jake says that, he's a horrible person. You know, like if this character, I'm working on something right now with a person and there's two characters, a father and a son, and the father's like a hard guy, and the son is too soft. And the son, like the dad has been punched in the face a bunch, and the son is like, I wish one day I could get punched in the face. And then the other writer had the dad punch him in the face. And it's like, I see how that works on paper, but you're gonna have a dad punching his son in the face. That's just not gonna work, you know? So I think protecting the characters, making sure it's grounded, trying to make them grow.
When you say grounded, you use that term a couple times. What do you mean grounded?
Like, what would the smartest version of this character with their intelligence do? Not what is some wacky thing we can just come up with as a bunch of writers. Like grounded in the real world or in the world that you've created. It should obey the rules of the world, I think.
So I have a follow-up. Is there a character show that you're not involved with that you look at and say, that is really good? Like,
yeah, there are lots of shows.
So give me some examples.
Well, I'm not going to give them free, right? No. I think, did anyone watch Sex Education?
Yeah.
I really enjoyed all the first few seasons of that. Does anyone watch Boots? I thought Boots was pretty good. Veep, I thought especially the early seasons of Veep, I thought it got a little it just got a little repeaty at the end, maybe. I think that's another tough thing. I think we had an advantage of with a cop show was you can just have new cases. Yeah. Like I think that a lot of shows by season 7, 8, 9, they're crazy. They've run out of all the normal things you can do in a professor's office. So all of a sudden the professor has to
he has to get on water skis and jump the shark.
Yeah, exactly. You jump the shark. It's exactly where it came from. They ran out. There's only so much you can do.
That was happy days, people.
Yeah, but if you, other shows, other comedies, Curb I think is amazing. Curb Your Enthusiasm. There are some seasons that are great. Some seasons are not as great. Did people watch Curb Your Enthusiasm? I think it's really great. I think he's truly a genius. I met him once at the Emmys. I used a urinal next to his urinal. And then at the party, I was introduced to him, and I was like, I just used the urinal next to you, as we were shaking hands, and he ripped his hand away. It was like a perfect Larry David moment. I think Seinfeld is great. I think there are, and I love a lot of dramas. When you work in something, it's easier if you work. It's easier for me to watch a drama than it is for me to watch. Oh, I'm enjoying Slow Horses. Really like Slow Horses. Yeah. Everyone caught up though?
No. I'm caught up.
Okay. I think they did a thing in the last episode that potentially ruins the show. So I'm curious what people think.
Wow. Because
I'll still watch it.
Was something not grounded, or did they?
Yes.
Sell out.
There was something not grounded, and then they also, I think, completely sell out the conceit of the world.
Wow.
Do you agree? You watched it, you said, didn't you? Do you know what I'm talking about? Don't you think it was a little weird? Yeah. Okay.
Now I'm wondering if I'm caught up.
But apparently it was in the books. I haven't either, but crazy. Crazy.
We have a bunch more questions up here and all over. So let's Dan, just because of where we are, we're gonna give, maybe collect a couple of questions actually, and then
maybe 3 people can speak at once.
Yeah, all at the same time. And
Hi there, back here.
Hi.
So I know that the world of writing for TV is changing in an age of miniseries as opposed to longer seasons. So I'm just wondering what that means for people starting out in the industry, kind of going from job to job in that transition period, like what it's like right now and how people are surviving. I know the 2023 strikes, we're working on that issue. But.
Yeah, no, tough. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's tough out there. But there are shows and there are people doing stuff. I mean, the strikes coincided with the platforms realizing that they couldn't keep copying the Netflix model. So there was already going to be a slowdown, but the strikes, I think, it's like a battleship, but they stopped the battleship immediately instead of letting it very slowly die down. So it's tough, and it's also tougher. I had the luxury of being on Parks and Rec and doing 100 episodes before I started Brooklyn. So I had a tremendous amount of training. And it's a lot, and I was able to put together a living because 22 episodes, you're paid by the episode. Now you have to put together 10 episodes a year. It's just tougher. It doesn't mean it's impossible, but it is tougher. But it may also change. It may be when Parks started, there were something like 300 or 200 200 shows, scripted shows, and at the height there were 800, I think. And now it's probably like 400. So as bad as it is, it's better than it was then. And who knows? Maybe there'll be another explosion of stuff, But also, it's worth, I don't know. To pursue it for its own, you can pursue comedy for its own sake and see what happens. Who knows what at least for a while. Or give yourself a hard out. I had that hard out. I was going to go to law school if I didn't do it, I think that can sometimes motivate. But I will say this. No, I won't say it. Okay.
Are there any funny podcasts?
There are lots of funny podcasts. The Lonely Island podcast is great. If people are not listening to it, the Lonely Island Seth Meyers podcast, where they talk about all the digital shorts, is really, really great.
Any funny podcasts without famous people?
Have you been on a podcast recently, Russ? Are you trying to plug a podcast?
With like professors?
Any not famous podcasts that deal with political theory that might be great? Just tell us the podcast. I like a podcast called The Doughboys, but I think it's an acquired taste, and it's about fast food. It's reviewing fast food. But it's really an acquired taste. I really don't want people to listen to it and be like, this is what you
Yeah.
It's really about
I'm
an
curious.
odd couple that
All right, sorry for asking the question. More questions. We have lots more questions from students, including right up here in the front row, right up here, standing up.
Hey, how's it going? I know you
Good.
said you're a big fan of dramas as well.
Yeah.
I just want to ask, like, what do you think about like the death of like prestige TV? Like some of my favorite shows are like The Sopranos, The Wire, 6 Feet Under. I feel like HBO kind of ran with that in 2000s. What do you think HBO is kind of doing now with like Barry and those kind of shows, kind of continuing that line of kind of like the dark comedy sort of prestige television? I know it's kind of dying, that kind of breed of television.
Prestige
so
TV.
what do you think about that now?
I think prestige TV still exists. I mean, they're spending more money on TV shows than ever before, you know? I mean, like The Studio, which is a comedy, that had to be like, I think they spent like $15 million an episode. I mean, I think those, you're talking about like 5 unicorns that somehow were corralled in the same decade. Pretty good metaphor. But yeah, I still think there's prestige stuff out there.
I hate mixing metaphors.
What was corralling a
No,
unicorn?
that's what you kept it. So all in the same.
Oh, it felt like a
yeah.
dig,
It
didn't
was all
it?
in the same. It was on
Yeah.
the same farm.
You think that prestige TV is dying? I mean, I don't know. Oh, yeah, okay.
Right up here.
So much for coming to talk to us. I wanted to ask a question about writing political satire. I'm a big Parks and Rec fan, and one of the reasons that I really loved it was because it was a show that like was so effective at making fun of government, but was also like not very political at all. And it feels like today, like a lot of political humor kind of is almost cheap to me. Like it's a lot of making fun of politicians' like appearance or voices or like how they act. Like I see this a lot with like making fun of Trump. Like it all just feels kind of the same and repetitive. So like how do you write effective political satire that kind of balances making fun of institutions and politicians in an effective way while also actually staying like critical of policy?
First of all, great Rockefeller question. That feels very
I'm a gov major, if you couldn't tell.
Great. So I would argue that Parks and Rec is actually pretty political. I mean, it wasn't overtly political, but the sort of thesis of Parks and Rec is one person. If people in the government care, they can make a difference in a town's life, even if the people in the town don't want them to. It has like an Obama era belief that like well-minded, good, you know, people who, well-intentioned people can make a difference. And at the same time, it's taking the piss out of them and out of the town. I mean, it's really making fun of the town and their inability to see that Leslie Knope wants to do good for them. Whereas Veep, I think, which is also, as I said, super funny, Veep is a very cynical view of government, right? They're all incredibly self-motivated and they're idiots, and that's a post-Obama view of the world maybe, and also that guy did In the Loop and Death of Stalin. If people watch Death of Stalin, Death of Stalin is amazing. Also very close to what actually happened. I think, so I don't know that I have an answer for you. I think right now, the thing that's difficult is, like, would I set a comedy in the White House? I wouldn't, because there's like, whatever you think of him, a clown in the White House. You know, he is bigger than, like they said that on Veep. They wouldn't keep doing, it was very hard to continue doing Veep when they had a person who was saying ridiculous stuff. I wouldn't do a show about AI because AI is changing so quickly. You're gonna look like an idiot if you have people reacting to a thing that 6 months ago already happened, you know? So, I mean, could you set a show in a small town which has like a crazy mayor who's like Trump? I think it's difficult. Or is the answer to do another Parks and Rec and to say like, hey, this is a group of well-meaning people who really believe that our government has the capability of making the world better and not, you know, not making oligarchs richer or whatever.
And it's kind of interesting in Parks and Rec the way you folded in the tension actually between the Leslie Knope spirit of do-goodism and the more kind of libertarian suspicion of government. You had it both, you know.
Yes,
it was
but I
all
do
there.
feel like we always stack the deck towards Leslie.
Towards her, yeah.
Ron always caved.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it was fun to write Ron, but he always caved to her because he loved her. And so that was a part of the thing. But also, Tom was a schemer. April didn't care about anything. She was kind of a nihilist.
Yeah.
Donna and so Gary. It'd be funny if I couldn't remember his name. Jerry Gergich, but he became Gary. They were like bureaucrats, you know, like the worst imagination of what a bureaucrat was. And Leslie was able to rally them. And I think one of the things that made the show successful was that it felt like a real sampling of who works in a government and people's motives and stuff.
Yeah, I got to say, Dan, you know, I think the country needs a good show, and so good luck.
Wait, no,
we need you.
I got two last things. One is we do have gum. I think one of those,
there's gum.
One of those flyers promised that there
We
will be
didn't
gum.
want to throw it
and
at you in
so
case
if you
we
want
injured
gum,
someone.
There'll be gum when you come up afterward. But finish by telling anybody who wants to be a comedy writer or something else non-traditional, an actor, a writer, something for which there's not corporate recruiting, what advice you would give them while they're on campus?
Yeah. Don't do it. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I think it is, I mean, look, I think a thing that has really changed, my daughter is a first year in college, and a thing that has really changed is it feels like there's so much pressure now to do corporate recruiting or to become a doctor, to have a very teleological, direction-focused, end-focused job. And I really feel like when we were in college, there was a notion that you should do something that interests you and do something that you love, and that you will still be qualified to do something like go to med school as long as you take those classes at some point, go to law school, no matter what classes you take, as long as you do well at the LSATs and you do well, but that there was a worth that is greater than just the monetary worth. And then also, ironically, I don't think I'm answering your question at all.
No, you actually are.
Also, there was a perhaps naive belief that if you did the thing you loved and you did it well, you'd find a way to make it work. You know, and look, there are kids I went to college with who are literal billionaires. I've done very well. I am not a billionaire, but also like I wouldn't trade my life for their life. That's not, I'm not shitting crapping on finance at all. My brother is in finance. He has a fascinating life. I'm really not. But I think my advice to you is do whatever you can to continue to follow your dreams for as long as you can. Prepare yourself for a life that may be in a more practical field. But in my opinion, and I am not there recruiting, and I'm playing with your lives by saying this, but the beauty of college is it is this sandbox where you get to play and experiment, and I don't know, I'm so envious of you. It's so great. You get to have professors like Russ, or good professors, and you get to also do sketch comedy, and you get to do improv, and you get to do a cappella, and you get to see those things. And my other piece of advice is don't use AI, I'm telling you. It is harder to write without it, but it is in the friction, it is in the restraints that you find your voice and that you find greatness. And I'm telling you, like, people want to write comedy on HBO because you can say fuck, even though you can't hear. It means you have to work twice as hard to write a funny joke on network, because those kinds of restrictions mean you have to figure out creative ways to get around them. And in a similar way, it's not a one-to-one analogy, like struggling with something is where the greatest art comes from, and the greatest satisfaction. You will have the greatest satisfaction if you do it yourself.
Dan, thank you so much.
Thank all of you. Thank you. Thank you, Dartmouth. Thank you, Nelson.
Thank you, Nelson.
I'm taking one.